Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Grind. My name is Kelly Johnson, your fun and friendly host. We are on episode 14 of season 2, the very best one yet. Support from this podcast comes from Fluent. Fluent fits into your daily grind. No more finding time to study. You browse the web, you learn a new language. It's that simple. Learn more at usefluent.co. If you're a new daily grinder, listening to our pod, or have been grinding with us since season 1, feel free to check out our journey so far and share your feedback with us. Get us on the map, help us grow, share this episode with a friend, and tag them on social. And give us a rating and quick review on Apple. Virtual high five to you in advance. So we're going to start off right away before we go live with our special guest of the day. Here is our fast fact.
M&M stands for Mars and Murray. Forrest Mars, son of the Mars Company founder, first spotted the British confection Smarties during the Spanish Civil War and noticed the candy shell prevented the chocolate from melting. He teamed up with Bruce Murray, son of Hershey's chocolate president, and company later trademarked the "melts in your mouth, not in your hand" slogan. There's your fast fact of the day.
We're going to get this party started. We're going to get our special guest on the show for today. Born and raised in Hawaii, now he lives in Minnesota to pursue his dreams of working in sports. A former college student athlete, currently the athletics assistant, event management, and intramural coordinator at the University of Minnesota Crookston. Loves, lives, and breathes sports. Host of the Sports as a Job podcast. We're going to welcome Kolby Castillo.
Thank you, Kelly, for actually having me on the podcast. It's definitely a different situation when I'm an actual guest instead of the host. But hello to all the Daily Grind listeners. As she said, my name is Kolby Castillo. I'm actually originally from Hawaii, and now I live in Crookston, Minnesota, about 6 years now. My full-time job, I work as an assistant event management and intramural coordinator at a D2 school called University of Minnesota Crookston. And then kind of my second full-time job and also the passion project is the Sports as a Job, where I host a podcast. We put out articles about the sports industry, and then we also have several other podcasts there as well.
Yeah, really well said, Kolby. I'm so excited to have you on the Daily Grind and share your story with our listeners out there in the world. Excited for our conversation and learn more about what you do in your own daily grind, as well as who you inspire and motivate in your own network and with our audience today. So, yeah, you mentioned on your intro, I can tell by your accent, you're from Hawaii a little bit. So, Kolby, what first got you interested in sports?
Yeah, so that's the story where the story begins. And it's interesting because when I talk to a lot of people in the sports industry, it's similar to my own story in the sense that they never knew making sports a career was an actual thing. So going into college, my freshman year, throughout high school, the big question was, Kolby, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? What do you want to do? And I always used to say, oh, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a physical therapist. Call me Dr. Castillo one day. And part of it, I chose that profession because it sounded nice, the money was well, and that's what everybody else wanted me to do. And then my freshman year of college, shout out to my advisor Eddie Walker, who I'm still have a good relationship with. He actually, my first meeting I ever had with him, we had like an hour conversation. It was supposed to be about my class schedule, but all we talked about was sports and business. And he said, "Are you sure you want to, do health science?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I want to do." And he said, "Well, let's give sport management a try." So he put me in like an intro sport management class. And then from that first class for my freshman year, that's when I knew I was like, okay, I'm gonna work in sports. Forget the whole Dr. Castillo physical therapist. I'm gonna just work in sports for the rest of my life.
Wow, it's kind of cool. You're similar to our previous guests, or just in general. I think on the podcast, when people share their initial interest, how they become interested in what they're doing on their own daily grind, comes to a younger experience that you had.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on it, I think you made the right decision, obviously, and excited to all that you accomplished and what you've achieved so far working in sports. I'm excited to share it on the podcast further. So I guess what steps then did you take to pursue working in sports? So you had that where you switched the majors. Now you're focused in working on the sports. Take our listeners through that process.
I think the one thing I look back at it is something that I wish I probably would have done differently, but also something that I push for people to do is to be proactive in your goals and your dreams. And what that means basically is taking action to accomplish your goals. So for me, it was working in sports. So what I had to do was internships. I had to get, basic experience throughout college. I had to make sure I had the right network. So I had to do that. So I every summer from my freshman year, I did internships over the summer. And then from my freshman year to my senior year, I actually was a student worker within the athletic department. So I constantly did stuff to help myself develop and personally and professionally. But the one thing I would tell people is definitely try different things. The one thing about my journey, I stayed within the college athletics. And that was probably because that was my main goal, was to be a college athletic director one day. But I only did college athletic internships. And my advice to everybody is try different things. Try pro sports, try amateur sports, try youth sports, try it all. Because in that process, you'll be able to find out what you love, but more importantly, find out what you don't love.
Mhm. Yeah, really well said. I think really great takeaway early on in this episode, just being able to, go outside your comfort zone, ask questions, gain different experiences out there. It sounds like you did, doing a lot of different internships. Did you work, when you had those internships, did you work in different sports, like not just, focused on basketball or football or a singular thing, or different departments? Was it kind of a variety of internships that you took on?
Yeah, it was a variety. Luckily the internships I had, like from my freshman year, I used to clean the weight room, and then I used to do home game operations. So I used to just like set up the equipment, help the layouts with the games and all that. And then over the summers I did these college athletic administration internships. So I got the whole deal of compliance, marketing, fundraising, sales. I mean, I did it all. So I had the whole total package when it came to within the college athletic world. I basically tried every single thing.
Mm-hmm. That's great, and it's cool that you have that wide variety, and now you can share that story with others. Again, taking on different roles. Apply. I'm assuming you probably went through a ton of different applications, talked to a lot of different people to get where you are today, which is great, and it shows like very perseverance and having that goal in mind. We're really goal driven on this podcast, so I think you took the right steps in making that dream become a reality, which is really cool. So then now with your current role, you have that passion project as well, which we're
Hmm.
going to talk about a lot, sports as a job. So what was your aha moment in starting sports as a job?
Yeah. So for people, like as I mentioned, sports as a job is basically the home for the aspiring and current sport industry professional. My aha moment. So sports as a job is actually fairly new. I only started it in last November, but it's kind of taken off. Like it's kind of we've been able to build this big community. People are constantly listening to it. They're constantly using our page. But the aha moment for me with sports as a job was I was working in sports and I realized that not many people told me about their true experiences when they were working in sports, right? They would tell you advice, they would tell you about how fun it was, how happy they were, but they never told you the true experience. So I wanted to document that and to share it. And so it started off as a self blog where I was doing like this, just these, blogs weekly saying, hey, this is what happened in my week. But then I realized I was like, oh, I don't know if I really like the blog thing. And then I've always been a big podcast person. And I was like, well, what's stopping me from doing a podcast? So I moved it into the podcast. And the aha moment was my first two episodes. I literally, and I tell this story all the time, I joke around with people, was I had like 4 listeners on there. And I figured, oh, it's probably my mom, it's probably my dad, and it was probably my girlfriend at the time. And then hopefully maybe one extra person. And I got this DM on Instagram from this person all the way in Ireland, which was like weird. And I was about to delete it because I was like, oh, it's spam, right? Like who's messaging me from Ireland? And in the message, he's like, hey, I just want to tell you I appreciate you sharing your story. That I'm super thankful that you're sharing this. I'm actually in Ireland and have always wanted to work in the soccer industry. And you actually, after listening to your episode, you really pushed me to chase after my dreams. I booked a ticket. I'm leaving at the end of the month. I'm moving to England. And he's actually there right now. He actually messaged me like a month after that and was like, hey, I'm doing that. And from then on, I was like, you know what? I need to interview. I need to talk to as many sports industry professionals as possible, have these real conversations and let them share their story to inspire others.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Like full circle there in regards to you had someone, one of your initial listeners, and now that's an awesome success story to have right away, launching the podcast, which is really cool. And it's another great platform. You mentioned you enjoyed podcasting. You had that self blog to start with as well. Did you have like a writing background or I guess like podcasting background before, or just kind of that media background?
Mhm.
Or
No, I see that's the crazy thing. And I think that all of us that get into it, you'll be amazed how many of us don't have like did you have a media background? No, like you didn't have a media background. Like there's no like when it comes to this kind of stuff, you don't need that type of background. So for as writing, I've always enjoyed writing. So I growing up, I always did like poetry and I would always journal. Like I currently do it now. Like I've started a page where I put my poems on it and all that. But like I've always been in touch with that. With the podcasting, I've always listened to it, but I've always considered myself an introvert person. And I think we all are a bit, but I was always an introvert in the sense I really didn't go up my way to have conversations. So part of me doing the podcast was one, pushing myself out of my comfort zone. So there was something for myself to benefit. But also, again, when going back to the component, I always love to tell stories. I mean, you trace it back to when I like to do poems. I like to share my emotions. I like to tell stories in words. So I never did have that background. I honestly Googled it. Like I was Google how to start a podcast. What do I use? The mic that we're using now, I used to use just a regular like these earphones I used to use. Audio was super bad. You know, it's crazy. I mean, you don't that, and that's the amazing thing about today is you don't need any professional background to start this. Anybody can start a podcast. Literally anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really well said. I have a lot of similarities myself on the daily grind. Just, coming in with the basic of equipment, Google searching what's the best way to reach out to listeners, how to start the podcast, how to record, how to post production, things of that nature. So really self-taught podcasters out there. It's cool.
Have you ever listened back to your first episode?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, how does it make you feel?
I was like, wow, I've come quite so far, quite a journey.
No, I've listened to the first episode, and it's crazy. I'm actually the episode is coming out 60-second episode, and it's more like 70 because I did delete some, but I left the first two episodes kind of to make myself laugh, but also show people like, hey, like you can be absolutely like it was just me, a 15-minute rant of me just talking and going off. It makes me cringe inside, but it's part of the journey, like you were saying. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's cool to see the progress that you made over time, as well as just building up to different goals. Like I had a goal of recording 10 to 15 episodes to start, and then once I went over that hump, I was like, oh wow, the daily grind, we can keep on doing this each and every week. Reaching out to a lot of different people like yourself to be amazing guests on the show. I think it's really cool to talk to others, and you're able to do that on your channel as well. So yeah, tell our listeners, our daily grinders out there, more about Sports as a Job podcast.
Yeah, so the Sports as a Job podcast, we release every Sundays at 8 a.m. Central Time. But every single week, you can expect somebody from the sports industry. And my definition of the sports industry is very broad. So I have everybody from entrepreneurs, people who work in nonprofit foundations, college athletics, pro sport. I mean, if you work in sports, I have you on the podcast. And we do these interviews. It's about, I would say, 30 to 45 minutes long. And we basically just talk about their journey. I ask them, what is it that you currently do? How do you do it? How did you get to where you are today? What are some of the interesting stories? And then, like, for example, my very past episode, this episode that's going to be coming out, one thing for him was that mental health was a big issue. He's super open about mental health online. So I ask particular questions when it comes to certain guests. I'm like, hey, well, you shared with us about this mental health. Why is it so important to you? So it's all about learning about their journey, but also having that open conversation. So after you listen to it, I'm hoping you can take the lessons they shared with you, apply it to your own career, and it's just entertaining. At the end of the day, it's entertainment.
I love it. I love talking about sports too. I think you do an incredible job of narrating each and every guest that you have on the show, as well as having them you ask really key questions, to dive even deeper in regards to the behind the scenes of the sports industry that a lot of listeners, I mean, I'm in the sporting goods industry, so I do have a background or I see what's going on. But for those others that are outside the industry, just, the avid sports fan or, follow certain teams, both professional or collegiate, I think it's really cool that you're able to find that niche or find that audience. If I'm following this football team, oh, it's cool. This person works in the department and adds value to that overall company. So really great.
I mean, you never know what's actually going on. For like you working at Wilson, right? Like all these sporting goods, when they see a Wilson basketball, they just see the basketball, but they don't understand the process of the factory, of the workers that had to, design it, the people had to actually sell it. Or when you see these games on TV, you're like, oh, wow, they just popped up this NBA bubble out of nowhere. And that's cool. That's cool. But it's like, no, there's a process. There's hundreds and hundreds of people involved. And it's putting the spotlight on the people who aren't necessarily in the spotlight. These people that are guests on the podcast, these are the ones that put the spotlight on others. So for me to turn it around, it's different for them, but it is also a rewarding feeling for myself when I'm able to put them on the spotlight, give them a platform to tell their story. Because, and that's the one thing that when I first started, and with everything I do, it's something I truly believe in, is that everybody has a story to tell, and every story is worth to listen. Like you could be sitting at the bus stop, at the public bus stop, I tell people, and the person next to you, no clue who they are, have a conversation with them and they could change your life. I mean, you truly never know who around you has this amazing story. So I mean, it's just one of those things. The more stories I'm able to tell, the more stories I'm able to bring in. That's always been the goal, is to tell as many stories as possible.
Yeah, I really like it. I like that goal driven on this podcast. So yeah, we talked about sports as a job podcast. You actually have other podcasts within the whole sports as a job brand. So can you tell our listeners more about Outnumbered with Kelly and Hollis, as well as the rookie contract?
Yeah, perfect. So sports as a job, we actually had at the peak of it, I think we had 4 podcasts at one time, because I was like, I realized how amazing podcast was. And I was like, hey, if you guys want to start a podcast, I'll help you launch a podcast. And so the rookie contract podcast, that launched about 2 weeks ago. That was an in-house launch within the sports as a job. And they basically focus on the interns of the sports world. So it's a similar thing to sports as a job, but they focus on the interns. They focus on what do these interns do? What are their experiences? What is it like working there? That type of thing. And then the rookie contract, or not the rookie, the what was the other Outnumbered podcast with Kelly and Hollis. They are 2 women in the sports industry that are navigating their own career, but they cover certain topics as far as how to network, personal branding. So they cover key topics when it comes to building your sports career. And they were a podcast that was going already, but I approached them like, hey, would you be interested in coming on to the sports as a job team? And they said yes. And we've kind of built this little podcast network, and we have some big news coming soon. And hopefully, by the end of the month, we're actually going to launch a sports as a job Canada up north. So that's going to focus on all the sports industry professionals in Canada. So like I was telling you, sports as a job, we're the home of the aspiring and current sport industry professional. So we want you to be able to come to our page. We have a website, sportsasjob.com. See all these podcasts, whether you're an intern, whether you're 10 years of experience, whether you're just starting. We're able to feed you this information through the podcast. We're able to feed you information through the articles that we put out, the videos we put out, and we just want to be the hub and the home for all of these.
That's great. Really well said. I love the teaser too, hinting at Canada. We got a few Canadian guests on our show, so very fitting. We'll talk more on sports as a job, but we'll also put that contact information, where to find the website, how to read the articles, videos, interact with Kolby's brand, which is really cool. You've been around it's gonna be almost a year now, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing. It's definitely a journey, and that's the one thing. Like for people who do want to start a podcast, I think the goal is to just start in the first place. I think we overthink it when it comes to certain things, and that's what it's something I'm always been about, is taking action. Like you've been through the process, right? You try to Google everything possible, and even if after you Google it, you're like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I have all the information. So I think when it comes to starting a podcast or just doing something in general, I think that the first goal has to be just take action. Don't overthink it. Just take action. And then from there you can always adjust.
Yeah, really well said. You can definitely make changes as you go to improve, better your brand, reach out to other people in the world. Just a lot of different just endless possibilities to grow. But yeah, being said, just being almost a year old podcast around, do you have any favorite interviews so far with guests or favorite sports leagues to follow?
Yeah, yeah. There's been amazing. Anybody that has been a former guest, if you're listening to this, trust me, all of you are amazing. There was a reason why I chose you as a guest, is because I found you very interesting. But my one of my favorite ones has to be Adam Martin. He started his own marketing agency, but he's also has this podcast called the Makers Podcast, where I think he's been doing it for about 4 years. Um, and his podcast is focused on the sports industry creatives. So he's been interviewing sports industry creatives for like 4 years. He had, like I was telling you, he has his own marketing agency that he does sports work. And then he also created this whole community. So he's been around a long time. And the reason why that's my favorite episode is because, in a lot of ways, I told him this too, is like, what he's doing is what I thrive and hope to be one day, right? That sense of consistency where he's done it for 4 or 5 years, the community he's been able to build. But like he talked about, like all these stories, he's been able to do so many things just because of the podcast. And it started off as a passion project, just like for yourself and I, Kelly. Like, this isn't our full-time job. We don't do this for full-time. And if anything, we don't even make any money off of it, you know? So it's like, why do you do it? And then he says that's what he ran into. He ran into that issue maybe like 2 years in the road. And he was thinking, he was like, I got a family, and he had 2 kids. He had his wife, and he realized, he's seen for 2 years how much work podcasting is. It's a ton of work. I always tell people too, it's easier to start a podcast than it is to maintain it. And he always talked about the amazing experiences, though, the people that he was able to meet, the people that would come to him and be like, hey, dude, you changed my life. Like, I was able to do this. And that's the things that I strive for. So Adam Martin, if anybody is listening, please go check out our website, re-listen to that specific episode. I think you'll love it. You'll love what he's doing on his podcast. But by far, that was probably my favorite episode.
Yeah, Adam Martin sounds quite interesting background. That's cool, and that's one of the many guests that you have on your show. I guess going back to that episode format, how do you choose like your theme of the episodes, or reaching out to different people in the industry, like Adam, for instance, to tell their own sports story?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan, and I'm sure you know who Joe Rogan is, and everybody listening, I'm sure you know who Joe Rogan is. But the one thing about Joe Rogan that always stood out to me was he chose people he was interested in, right? People he found interesting. He never let other people dictate like who he had as guest. And that's kind of the approach I take. It's like, I see somebody on my social feed, because I'm always consuming, information and networking with people, and I find out, hey, this person is kind of interesting, and I don't even look at like their title, to be honest. Like, the title is the last thing I get to. It's, oh, this person seems very active on social media about the certain things he's talking about. I heard certain things about her that maybe I want to ask and talk about. So to me, it's, and who's interesting in that sense, like, and that's kind of the way I've always thought, is like that curiosity. If I'm curious about you, I want to have you on the podcast, and that's basically how I choose my guests.
Yeah, that's cool. I would say likewise, very similar as well. Just, I come across a lot of people in my network or outside my network, mutual friends, people just in different groups I'm interested, I'm passionate about. I have similar passions as them too. Think that they're very goal driven, or have, likewise into sports or other different things, but I'm across the board when it comes to different industries or working professionals out there. But I think that's really great. I think it creates that comfortable conversation, as well as, again, going back to that storytelling, creates that really well experience for the audience. So,
and that's the challenge, though. Like, when you, like, for example, when you have guests, the challenge is, can you make this person as comfortable as possible when you're talking to them? Because maybe you've talked to them once or twice before, but when you get on the podcast, you really don't know each other on a deeper connection. So when you're trying to have these deeper conversations and these stories, that's kind of the challenge. Like, can I get this person to open up a little bit? And there's been moments, like, another episode I want to refer to is Jenny Fisher. She's a storyteller herself. That podcast episode is actually, again, that's one of my favorites. And it seems like, based on the information, a lot of people like that as well. But I popped a question in there. where I asked her because she interviews women's basketball players. She went like on a country road trip, and was interviewing coaches and players. And she talked about how she looked up to these certain women reporters, right? And I flipped the question and I was like, hey, I was like, I saw that you kind of got this fan letter for this young girl. And it's interesting because now it's flipped the switch where you're no longer the person looking up to women in sports. You're the person that young girls are looking up to you, that are looking to get into the sports industry. And how does that make you feel? And within that moment, it was cool because you heard her, she paused for a second, and you could hear her like clear her throat and be like, huh, like I never ever was asked that question. So it's always challenging and interesting to see if I can make that as comfortable as possible with guests, and see if I can get that deep conversation out of them.
Mhm. Yeah, that was one of my favorite episodes on your podcast, actually, Jenny Fisher, because she had the background at Marquette too. So just kind of like Milwaukee ties, but yeah, really great
Mm-hmm.
story. Again, you're able to narrate, and you hit the nail on the head in regards to diving deeper, going behind the scenes in the sports industry. So speaking of the sports industry, do you have advice for our listeners out there that are trying to break into the sports industry?
Yeah. And right now it's obvious it's a unique time, right? With the pandemic and the quarantine and COVID. But my advice for everybody, again, it's all about taking action. I think when it comes down to it, to the core, it's all about taking action. It's figuring out first off what it is you want out of your career, and figuring out what actions you have to take to get yourself closer to that. And when it comes to the sports industry, from the people I've spoken to, and this is not just advice for myself, but 60 plus sports industry professionals, is one, it's networking, right? It's going to be all about who do you know? Who knows you? What are people saying about you when you're not there in the room? Building these connections. Another one is building your personal brand. Like I said, like what are people saying about you? What are you doing outside of just your job to develop professionally and personally? And that's why right now I've helped a bunch of people start a podcast, and I tell people like, hey, podcasting is a good way to go. But if it's not your deal, maybe it's a blog, maybe it's simply posting on Twitter or Instagram, maybe it's just networking. So let's figure out what exactly you're comfortable, what exactly can you do to build yourself professionally and personally. And all of that again ties in, take action. At the end of the day, any little step, any little thing that you're doing to help get yourself better is better than nothing.
Yeah, really well said. These are really great takeaways for our listeners out there. Yeah, networking, that building that personal brand, as well as taking action, taking the next steps, whether it's sending emails, calling someone, getting in touch with one of your friends that you know, or coworkers, or someone that you've met in the past that has, that personal tie, or be able to ask questions or lead you in the right direction if you're not sure on where you want to go first, or you mentioned earlier in this episode, having the variety of experiences. So being able to, try out a lot of different things, see what you're interested in and what you're not interested in, and then taking the right steps. You could definitely reach out to Colby or myself in regards to kind of pointing yourself in the right direction. We both had really great experiences in regards to
Mm-hmm.
finding, self-discovering what our passion is, and being motivated to, go towards accomplishing and achieving those goals, both personally and a career standpoint. So you have great experience working in collegiate sports. Can you share any fun and favorite memories over the years so far in your current role or previous roles?
Yeah, definitely. There's the one story that comes to mind. It was actually this past year, and part of my job is in being in charge of home game operations. We were at an alumni game, men's basketball, women's basketball alumni game, and we had this couple, and I just so happened to be sitting there, making sure everything was going okay. And there was this couple that met at the University of Minnesota Crookston. One was a men's basketball player, the other was a women's basketball player, and they had their little son, and I could overhear, and the son was kind of excited, clapping and cheering, and he was like, Daddy, Mommy, that's the court that you guys played on, that's the court that you guys played on." And there was something about that moment where it made me realize, like, this is why we do what we do. This is why we work in sports, is because of that, like that indirect effect on creating these beautiful moments. And that to me, honestly, and that brings up like another memory for me. Like the part of the reason why I want to work in sports was, and when I was little, when I was about 8 or 9. My grandpa had cancer, and I was playing this little league game. And the only time, he was going through chemotherapy treatment, and he was weak. He could barely get out of bed. He was barely eating. But anytime I had a little league game, he was always there. I look up at the stands, and he was always there cheering. And I never knew it. But then when now, like a couple years ago, when I really thought about it, what does sports mean to me? It's that moments right there. It's the fact that we're able to put on events, create these memories indirectly. And we don't even think we can do that, but that's just the power of sports. But yeah, that moment to seeing, the mom and dad where they met, where they both played, and they're bringing their son back to show them, that was just a crazy moment for me.
That's great. I love it. Looking back at all the different experiences, memories, like you mentioned before, I think just looking back on my lifetime so far, I can definitely recall those particular instances a lot more better than stuff that's outside of sports, I think, because we just have that, that energy, and it's a positive emotion, and it holds true to your heart, which is really cool. So I guess, yeah, looking back on your journey, rewind to, I don't know, 5 years, did you see yourself where you are today?
In a way I did. And I guess because of the fact that I've always prided myself in my work ethic, because when I look at it, like I was kind of in a sense, I was always thinking years ahead. Because when you look at it, so when I was talking about my freshman year of college, I was working within the athletic department. Well, because of that, as before I even graduated, they offered me a job to work within the athletic department. So I actually work at the athletic department where I was a student worker. And I was able to make that happen because I started working as a freshman. I understood the importance of those internships. And I kind of knew and I didn't know. Like, for example, I didn't know I'd be doing a podcast. I didn't know I'd be sitting here with you, Kelly, and being interviewed to do a podcast. Like, there's certain things that you don't know. And even right now, I don't know what's going to happen in a year. Like, that's something that I've really focused on in this quarantine, has been thinking about what exactly my goals are, what exactly it is I want. And I think that they're always changing. Like, what we want, what makes us happy, what we want to do for the rest of our life is always changing. And I tell people, like, right now, I love podcasting. I love working in college athletics, doing home game operations. Will that be the same in 5 years? Maybe not. Maybe I might absolutely hate it. Maybe I might want to work in sales. Maybe I want to get out in the sports industry entirely. But it's like taking it day by day, but also at the same time keeping those future goals in mind. Because again, it's all about taking action. So it's like, okay, what do I have to do today to reach those goals, make myself better? But it's crazy. That's definitely, I see myself in this position, but also there's many things I didn't see happening.
Yeah, really well said. I could say the same likewise. If you asked me like 5 years ago if I was going to start a podcast, The Daily Grind was not even in the picture. But I think it just goes back to those three important takeaways that you mentioned earlier, like that network. So just you and me, Kobe, on this episode talking, or with us talking to our other guests on our own platforms, or people that follow or support the brand, things of that nature. And then number two, yeah, that personal brand. So just with all those experiences that you've had, listeners out there, different life events that you've come across, going to different sporting events, stuff that's even outside of sports realm as well, does have an impact on your life and what you do in the long term. And then finally, like you mentioned before, taking action, super key. Just, being able to have that focus and drive to make the next step, whether it's in sports or in your own industry, what you want to get out, what you want to get out in life, as well as, what you're interested down the road. So really cool stuff. So I guess going back from that journey, do you have any advice for our listeners to stay motivated at what they do and stay connected with sports?
Yeah, definitely. There was something that someone said, a recent guest, about sports industry specifically. And he said, at the root of sports is play, right? At the root of sports is play. And now when I think of that, and what he meant by that is it's all about having fun. It's all about enjoying the process. And I think that's got to be, like, for example, motivation. And that's something that in the past couple weeks I've had to remind myself, like, especially with sports as a job, I took it too seriously at one point. Like, I was trying to make it more serious than it was, and I forgot about the why. I forgot about why I was doing it. and I started to be stressed out. I started to burn out, I guess you could say. But then I reminded myself, like, dude, you started this because you wanted to help people. You started it because you thought it was going to be fun. So for me, when I wake up every morning, I start off with the workout every morning, but it's always the constant reminder to myself, like, hey, stop taking yourself so seriously. Stop taking life so seriously. I mean, you have to enjoy it because, like, we're seeing in the news every single day, we don't know what happens. I mean, we're seeing so many people passed away that, like, what? Like, they passed away? Like, and we're hearing about it. So it's like, when you wake up in the morning, just remind yourself you're lucky. Don't take life so seriously. Don't take yourself so seriously, and just enjoy the process.
Hmm. Yeah, really well said. I'd say likewise, enjoying the process. I think keywords that you had, enjoying the little moments out there. So again, looking back at that one fun experience you had on that basketball court, those two parents and their kid, talking about the memories that they had. So enjoying those little moments too that you remember, and it helps motivate you down the road to achieve your own goals. I think that's really important, and it has that work life balance in regards to doing the podcast. You're not burnt out. You enjoy what you do, so that's
Mhm.
really important in order to find that satisfaction or fulfillment, and again, inspiring others out there to do the same, which is really key.
Mhm. I do want to say to the daily grind listeners, because again, like, there's something about, like, for me, when I listen to podcasts, I hear about all these amazing guests that are doing amazing things, and after listening to it, sometimes I look at myself like, hey, Colby, like, what are you doing? Like, you're not living up to what other people are doing. And I want you to be aware, the people that are listening, like, you don't have to be doing what I'm doing. You don't have to be doing what Kelly's doing. Like your own journey is your own journey. There's no right path to where you want to go. There's no set path. There's so many people I've interviewed that I've seen start from so many different places, of so many different backgrounds, of color, of ethnicity, of jobs. Maybe you're working outside of the industry that you dream to, but one day you're going to get to where you want to go. And it's making sure you don't pressure yourself, because for me, as a young sport professional, I think that's something I've always done, is I've pressured myself into, you know, into being afraid of taking action, because I would constantly compare myself to everybody else that was doing different things. And I mean, that's just the world we live in. We live in a world where it's all about showcasing and showing off kind of what you're doing. But it's like, don't do it. I mean, that's just the one thing. Like, if you take anything from this episode, is don't compare yourself to others as much as you want to, as much as it's part of your daily social media feed. Try not to do it. In the long run, it just hurts you. And I went through it, and I finally kind of come out on the other side of where I don't, like, I care about what other people are doing, but the same sense, I don't care because I'm not comparing myself.
Really well said, Colby. I think you hit the nail on the head again in regards to everyone has their own daily grind out there in the world. So you don't have to do what Colby does for work, or myself. You don't have to start a podcast if you don't want to. Do something that you're passionate about, and make the progress. You can you can start baby steps. It's not like you're gonna hit a home run with regards to building that podcast brand, or working on your own passion project. It takes time. It takes some work and effort. It takes it takes a journey. It's a journey.
It
So
is.
so we talked about your daily schedule, Colby. So what's on your daily grind in the upcoming months later this year?
Yes. So I started back up working my full-time job within the college athletic department. So that's definitely, with sports not going on, we do have all of our students back on campus. And part of my job is helping run the One Center and doing intramural programming. So the one thing that we're focused on, and I'm focused on, is trying to figure out how can we keep our student athletes and just students in general active, keep them as active as possible, keep life normal in a sense, and make sure they have activities to do. Again, it's when you're not doing things, you you're left to think a lot. And you're left in your room. Like, I was under quarantine, you were under quarantine, you're stuck in your room. I mean, you have nothing else to do but think, and sometimes that leads to very bad things. So right now the focus is on trying to make sure they have as many things as possible. We still make it a fun college experience for all of them. We make sure they're still developing professionally as a student or personally. And then with sports as a job, it's continuing to interview people. It's continuing to be that hub for everybody aspiring or currently in sports industry professional. We're hoping to launch maybe a podcast or two, up our game on the articles, and then hopefully partner up with some companies to see what else, how much more of an impact we can make out there.
Quite the daily grind you got going on, Kolby, in the months and later this year. Excited for your journey, so keep up that grind, as we say here on the podcast. Do you have a word of the day to motivate our listeners out there, Kolby?
Word of the day. So we actually, so I did think about this, and I do have an actual quote. And I guess I mean, you could say the word of the day is dream, but the quote comes from this guy that I listened to on the podcast from Andy Frisella, MF CEO. I definitely, I definitely would promote that personally and say, hey, go listen to that. But his quote was, dream so big, everyone around you thinks you're crazy. If your dream doesn't scare you, you're probably not dreaming big enough. And I literally have that in my actual office, and I have it up on my wall. But that's something that I've always told myself is to dream big, right? Dream big, aim big, or what is it? I can't remember what that says, but when you dream big and you don't make that dream, usually you still get close to it, right? And you still accomplish many great things. But I think sometimes we underestimate our ability as people to accomplish things. So whenever you're setting your daily goals, hey, you set, oh, I can do these 3 things today. Well, right now, let me tell you, you can actually probably do 5. You say, oh, I want to make this much amount of money. Well, you probably can make more than you actually think. So I think it takes people to tell you to dream big to make you actually realize that you can actually dream big and accomplish these things. So the word of the day is definitely dream.
Really well said. I love it. Dream fits perfectly with today's episode and Kolby's story. Yeah, Kolby, if listeners have questions, comments, want to get in touch with you, they want to, start listening to Sports as a Job podcast as well as your other podcasts on your network, how can they do so after this episode?
Yeah, so I'm on all social media platforms. It's basic on all social media. It's Kolby_Castillo, KOLBY_CASTILLO. I am on Twitter, I am on IG, and I am on LinkedIn as well. As far as the podcast, and when it comes to Sports as a Job, you can find us at all social media accounts, again, at Sports as a Job, and then visit our website to find everything as well at sportsasajob.com. But please, don't feel afraid to reach out to me. I'm always willing to talk, to chat it up. You can message me through social media. You can email me. And then next week, or within, we're going to be doing some webinars, and I'll be hopping on some webinars and helping people with their personal brands and different things like that. So definitely be on the lookout for that. But I'm always here. So if you want to just talk, if you want to chat it up, please reach out to me.
Wonderful. We will put Kolby's contact info as well as where to find Sports as a Job and all the good stuff in the show notes for today's episode on the Daily Grind. So thank you again for tuning in today's episode. A big thank you to Kolby for being on the podcast. Hey Daily Grinders, we have an Instagram contest with Fluent for the month of September. Head over to @KJF Daily Grind to enter and win a Fluent prize pack and Visa gift card. Ways to find the Daily Grind: follow us on Instagram at KJF Daily Grind and on Facebook as well. Check our website at www.kjfwi.org. Feel free to follow your host, Kelly Fast, here on Instagram at KellyJLefty or on Twitter at KellyJLefty as well. Until next time, my name is Kelly Johnson. Have a great day.